Our first official practice match is done and dusted, and now it's time for the debrief. Richmond played Collingwood last night at Icon Park, and the scores, well, it wasn't too flattering for us. Collingwood 21-6, 132, defeated Richmond 6-13, 49 by 83 points down at Icon Park. In what was our first proper four-quarter hit-out for 2025. And yeah, it was an interesting game. Nonetheless, we also had the live show last night, which was good fun. So thanks to everybody who joined in for that, first and foremost. Now, before we get stuck into the debrief of the Richmond-Collingwood game, make sure if you like the Richmond content, hit that like and subscribe button. It really helps the channel out, and we really appreciate the love and support. With that said, let's now talk about the game. We'll go through some player stats first, and then we'll talk about some key points and things we might have learnt from that game. Disposal-wise, Jacob Hopper led the way for us with 31 disposals. He also had 92% time on ground, which is extraordinarily high. So I'm not really sure what that means or what to make of that. It just seemed like a very high number in comparison to other people. He had 8 clearances as well, 5 marks, 2 tackles. It was probably one of our top 3 on the ground for the night, I reckon. Camden McIntosh had 30 disposals, 6 marks, 3 tackles, 6 clearances. And as we saw, he played a bit more of that defensive midfielder role, which worked at times, didn't work at other times. But yeah, I'm not totally sure where he fully fits in. But I think, again, he was probably in our best 3 or 4 on the night as well. And maybe he's done enough for round 1. I know there's a lot of people who don't want to see him, would rather see a kid in that role. But realistically, a kid's not going to play 78% time on ground and do that kind of work in the midfield. So unfortunately, it doesn't quite work like that just yet. So he'll still be featuring in our senior side undoubtedly for the first part of the season at least. Jaden Short, third highest disposal getter, 25 touches. Jack Ross with 24, who did some nice things. Nank Curvis with 22 disposals, only on 68% game time as well from Nank. Sam Banks had 21 touches, Tim Taranto 19. I really think it's important to highlight that Tim Taranto had the 4th lowest time on ground percentage out of our starting lineup. So he was spending a considerable amount of time on the bench, which would lead to his lowest stat count. So I did see a lot of comments about, Tim had a very underwhelming game, didn't get 25, 30 touches. That's a big part of the reason why. So whether it's clearly a time management issue, wanting to ease him into it, I suppose. But yeah, that's why we saw some lower output numbers from him. Tom Brown with 17 disposals. Nick Vlossen with 16. Thompson Dow with 15. James Trezise with 14. I thought Trezise had a really, really nice game, especially in that first and second quarter. There was maybe about 3 or 4 defensive 50 stoppages in a row where he actually was the one exiting with the ball or dishing it out to someone to exit with the ball. So he was reading those quite well. He definitely showed a lot more this week than what he did last week against West Coast. And I think this was a more positive step forward for him against Collingwood, which was really good to see. Ryan Mantle had 14 disposals, kick to goal, 4 tackles, 3 marks, 1 clearance. It looked lively out forward, took a really nice pack mark. I thought it was a little bit long overdue to get him into the midfield, and not even necessarily him specifically, but just anyone else to add some pace, which we'll get to after. But yeah, kicked a nice goal. It's his pressure and his harassment, I think, that's going to help keep him at a consistent level. He just needs to hit the scoreboard a little bit more, which would be nice. 2 behinds didn't help, but he wasn't the only one who had a bit of a bad night kicking for goal. Luke Traynor had 12 disposals. What a super impressive display it was from him. 40% game time, only came on for the last quarter and a bit. And he looked exceptionally composed, not out of place whatsoever. And look, I understand and acknowledge the heat was it was definitely out of the game by that stage. A lot of the big name Collingwood players were off the ground and things like that. So I get all that. But Traynor still didn't look overwhelmed at all. Hit his targets, took, I think, 3 or 4 intercepting marks. Had 2 tackles, got a clearance. I think he's definitely put his best foot forward to make a round 1 debut. Whether or not he's got the fitness base behind him to do it yet, I'm not sure. The club will obviously know more info about that. But purely from a skill level perspective and composure and things like that, I think he ticked all the boxes. And if it's not round 1, it will definitely be early on in the season. I think that we see Luke Traynor out there for an AFL debut. Steely Green had 12 disposals. He didn't do too bad. He did some nice things. Again, probably another one of those players who looked a lot better in the first half than the second half. I think as a collective unit, our second half was not great. But yeah, he did some nice things in the first half. Seth Campbell, 12 disposals, including 3 tackles. and 2 clearances. I probably wanted to see a little bit more from him. There was a couple of times where he was just a little bit fumbly on some fast breaks that we had, which probably cost us a chance to score or a shot on goal. So he needs to kind of just improve on that area of his game just to help complete that chain of transition football so we can get a chance to score. So he'll get better at that. He's only a young kid. He's not even played 25 games at AFL level yet, I don't think. So he will undoubtedly keep getting better as the year goes on. Jacob Blight had 12 disposals, 7 marks. He obviously had that shoulder knock as well, but hopefully he's all right from that. He did go back out there, it must be said, so I assume that he was all okay. There was probably, even though he took the 7 marks, I reckon there was maybe another 3 or 4 that he kind of just didn't go for. Whether he was called out of it by another player, I'm not sure what happened there, but I'd like to see him back himself a lot more and go for most marks because he's got a good set of hands. So I think he should have just a bit more license to do that. But he definitely did some nice things and put his best case forward to play in round 1 as well. Nathan Broad, 11 disposals. Samson Ryan, 10 disposals, 14 hitouts, 2 clearances, 3 marks. The 3 marks should have been about 6 or 7, though, if we're being realistic, especially that one in defence at the end there where he was he's pretty much standing by himself and went through his hands straight to the Collingwood players and they scored an easy open goal. They're the ones that hurt the most, I think. The around the grounds or the forward 50 ones where it's a pack and he's got defenders trying to spoil him. You can understand not marking that because even Lynch and Rewald don't mark all of those. So that's okay. But it's the uncontested ones that he's got to start holding to really start making an impact around the ground. So that was probably a reasonably disappointing display from that perspective, especially when he's a player that's going to be trying to put his case forward for round 1. I don't think he's done himself any favours there last night, unfortunately. Ben Miller, 8 disposals, 5 marks. I mean, the one thing that keeps standing out for me is that glaring turnover late in the game where he kicked it across the back 50 and hit Bobby Hill lace out. I think there's a spot for him in the side if it involves doing backup ruck work. As a defender, I think there's still a bit of work to do, and someone like a Blight maybe's gone ahead of him. We've still got Bolter to come back. I think until that happens, though, Miller's probably going to see some game time, unless we opt to go with Kazitsky and Blight, which is a possibility, I suppose, even though we didn't see that last night. But yeah, similar to Samson Ryan, Miller, I don't think did himself any favours putting his foot forward for a spot for round 1. But I think he still features heavily on the coach's magnet board anyway. Kane McAuliffe, 8 disposals. He only played 15% game time. I'm assuming that he's playing in the VFL today. I would like to think so, based on that. But the fact he got 8 disposals in that 15% game time is a really, really positive sign. And I think all Richmond supporters would love to see more of Kane McAuliffe rolling through the midfield. So hopefully we get a bit more of a glimpse of that today. Morris Rioli, 5 disposals, 1 mark, 2 tackles. Fairly off game, I reckon, from Morris. Needed to see a bit more from him. He was involved in a couple of good passages of play, but just otherwise seemed a little bit lost. And there was a few times where he was almost our marking target up forward from various kicks, which is not how we should be using him. And I don't think that was by design. That's just how it kind of panned out. But yeah, would like to see him. I'd like to see him up the ground a bit more. I think he's the kind of player you want to get involved in the play early, get some quick disposals early on just to build the confidence. So I wouldn't mind seeing us try and do something like that for the next game. Jacob Bauer, he finished with 2 goals. I think he got our first 2 goals of the game. He took 3 marks. One of them was a really, really good mark with Darcy Moore hot on his tail. I think in the first half, I think he was showing enough to suggest he'll probably be there in round 1. Again, the second half, it's really hard to judge because realistically, the ball hardly even went into our forward half in the second half. And when it did, it was a bit of a dog's breakfast. So I don't want to hold that against him because it kind of ended up being very similar to the West Coast game where it wasn't really working for a forward to do some nice stuff. The big thing still is you want to see him alongside Tom Lynch because I think that's where we're going to see him become a better player, not being the main man. He's had to play the main man 2 weeks in a row now. He's not the right size to do that, to be honest. But I think he's done enough to put himself in calculations for round 1. Liam Fawcett only had the 34% game time. He had 3 disposals, 2 tackles, a mark. He almost had a couple of really nice marks, but just couldn't complete the transaction, as they would say. Look, you want to, I think, and hope that he gets some VFL game time today. I'm not sure if he was on the extended list, but yeah, he probably didn't show enough in that 34% game time to put himself into round 1 contention because this man, Harry Armstrong, the one after him, even though Harry Armstrong, and this will sound a little bit bizarre even as I'm saying it, but even though he only had 3 disposals, it was the 4 tackles, the mark, and the other attempted marks and the crash and bashing that he was doing that I just thought maybe he is a chance for round one. For a young kid to really engage and sort of thrive on that body contact and physicality was really good to see. Throwing himself amongst it, doing the secondary ruck in the forward 50 stoppage was interesting. I'm not sure I'd be having him do that too often, but he was learning from it, and he was having a crack and he was throwing his weight around. And I was spewing that he kicked that behind, but I think he might be in calculations for round one. So, like, realistically, we've got Tom Lynch, Jacob Bauer, and then the third forward is going to be out of Harry Armstrong, Fawcett. Maybe Sims is in calculation as well, probably to the lesser end, I guess. Sims played 24% game time. I don't think he registered a stat, but again, it was the attack on the ball and on the contest that I really, really like seeing from the young kids. It'd be quite easy to go to AFL level and be a bit more timid in your shell. So to see these young guys really throwing themselves forward and bashing and crashing and having a go is kind of all you can ask for. And no doubt, I think Thomas Sims will play some VFL today as well. But the more game time that he sees, he's going to keep improving. I think he's going to be a really good one to watch for the long-term prospect. So they're the individual player stats. Looking at the team stats, there's some really interesting ones here. Inside 50s, we actually only lost by 2, 51-50, but it was what we were doing with it inside 50, which seems to be the story of our last 3 or 4 years, to be honest. We were going at 39.2% efficiency inside 50, which is really, really bad. By contrast, Collingwood went at 52.8. You kind of want to be at about that 45 to 50% mark. And we just blew far too many opportunities, which was, a bit annoying. Free kick count, we actually won the free kick count, believe it or not, 20-13. Hitouts, we won 42-34. Clearances, we won 43-40. And even though that might seem nice on the surface, I think what it displays is that it's all about the quality of the clearance as well. The Pies, even, they had a very strong team in, and you want to give full credit to them because they looked like a very well-oiled machine, as they should. But their midfield clearance work, essentially, if we didn't win the clearance, they were gone so quickly it wasn't funny, and they got a lot of very easy and quick ball inside 50, which put our defence under enormous pressure. And speaking in the midfield, and I sound like a broken record saying it, so I apologise, but it just becomes more and more evident as the weeks go on. We are way too slow in the midfield, especially when we have any combination of Taranto, Hopper, McIntosh, Ross. I'll throw Prestia in there as well. Those 5 players, I don't think we can play any 3 of them at any one time in the midfield. Like, in isolation, each player probably has some really good things to offer and plays all right on their day. Taranto's a good player in his own right. Ross is turning into a better player in his own right. Presti's a good player in his own right. But as a collective, as a trio, it doesn't work, because if the ball hits the deck and it's not in our hands, the opposition midfield are just absolutely torching us. Now, I know Nick Dacos is one of the best players in the competition, so he's going to burn a lot of people, but they made us look stupid and silly at times coming out the midfield. And even if the ball bobbles out to our attacking end, if we don't get possession there, their halfbacks come into play as well, and our midfield is just kind of too flat-footed to do anything about it. So this is where I think we need to have that point of difference. We need to have a third player in there that's got speed. Whether that's a Mansell, whether that's a Seth Campbell, whether that's a Rioli, I'm not too sure who the permanent answer is. We need to find someone. We need to find our next Shane Edwards. And the obvious answer might seem like Taj Houghton, but we don't even know if that's going to be the player he turns into yet. So you don't want to put that kind of pressure on him. But from what you see from the clips and things like that, he seems like the player that might evolve into that. But we're not going to see him until July, August. So we can't sit on our hands waiting for that to happen. So we need a bit more of a short-term solution for this. And I don't know what the permanent solution is, but we need to find greater balance in our midfield. Otherwise, we will keep getting belted. Teams will get far too many easy balls inside 50, and we're going to get heavily scored against. So that for me is the biggest takeout from the game. Marks inside 50, 10-15, we lost that by 5. We still laid 47 tackles compared to Collingwood 65, and we had 11 tackles inside 50. The tackles inside 50, that's actually a pleasing stat to see that it was a double-digit number. I remember early doors last season, we were only getting like 2, 3, or 4, which was severely alarming. So, to see that number is good. But look, overall, it was definitely a tale of two halves. That first half, we were very, very competitive. Collingwood obviously got off to a very good start in the first quarter, but then we settled and got ourselves back into it, which was really good to see. So they showed some maturity in that sense. Some of the young kids did really well, and then that second half, they kind of just blew us out of the park, didn't they? I think they went on a 12-goal run that we didn't score against them for quite a substantial period of time. And that's the big part of the game that we have to try and learn to stop. So it's going to be a learning and developmental thing. I think we have to have an understanding that there's still quite a large amount of inexperience in this side. Yes, we do have some experienced players out there that we need to lead the way. They can only do so much, though. You still need it to be a collective team effort. And there's going to be a lot of inconsistencies. And we're going to see some results like this, hopefully not too often. But I just think as well, and I'm not trying to dismiss the final scoreline too much, because Collingwood obviously deserved to win. And the scoreline is irrelevant. Let's be clear on that. But the accuracy of Collingwood was extraordinary. At one point, they were like 18 goals won. You could play this game again 5 times over, and they will not be that accurate again. So in that sense, maybe you take 20 or 30 points off, and then we kick 6-13. If we convert half of those, all of a sudden the scoreline, the margin looks to be more about the 35 to 45 point mark, which you would take every day of the week, I reckon, playing against the Collingwood. Obviously, it didn't eventuate that way, and there's reasons why. But yeah, it's just interesting to see those kind of stats there. But we've got to look forward to the round 1 game now. We get Tom Lynch back, who I think was on Fox Footy, said he's a near certainty to play round 1, which is good. Sam Lawler is still on track to play round 1 as well, possibly, depending on how his draw recovers. I still think they'll be a little bit cautious. That's why I say possibly. He thinks he'll play. I wouldn't be shocked if the club erred on the side of caution, but we'll see how that one goes. But yeah, that is the debrief for the Pies game. Obviously not a great end result, but you got to look for the silver lining. You got to look for the kids doing their thing. And I think undoubtedly the biggest highlight for me was definitely Luke Trainer's game, and fingers crossed we see some more of him in an early AFL debut. But let us know in the comments below, what did you make of the Tigers game? What did you like? What did you dislike? And what are you looking forward to seeing come round 1 against Carlton? As always, make sure you like and subscribe for more content, and I'll see you for the next video. Go Tigers!